2023 Board of Directors meeting for the Kitsap Public Facilities District. Our first agenda item is going to be public comment. Do we have public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do. We have a couple of people in the audience, and then we also have Mr. Anderson online too. So let's give the people in the audience an opportunity first, and then I'll invite Mr. Anderson to see if he has comment.
Okay, perfect. Whoever would like to go first, come on up to the podium. I don't think it's on.
There. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. I'm Beverly Parsons from Hansville. As you know, we had sent you a letter and had an exchange with you in September and November about the Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park, and we have sent a letter. I think you have copies of it, and that just today. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of the points that are in there. First of all, in our letter of September 25th, we raised 5 questions, of which only one regarding financial reporting was addressed in your November 3rd response. So we're requesting again that you answer the other 4 questions, which are questions 2 to 5, in our letter, and or explain why you are not answering them. I'm going to skip over point 2 and go on to 3 in the interest of time. Recall that in our September 25th letter, we introduced ourselves as residents of North Kitsap who are contributing to the updates of Kitsap County's Park, Recreation, and Open Space Plan and the Comprehensive Plan. We wanted to be sure you are aware that last Friday, December 15th, Kitsap County released its draft 2024 Comprehensive Plan update. The draft 2024 Comprehensive Plan has significant differences from the 2016 Comp Plan that we think has a bearing on the Port Gamble project. Your funding of the Port Gamble project was done in the context of the 2016 Comp Plan. So we are aware of significant public controversy about activities currently underway regarding the work you are supporting and its connection to the 2024 plan. So our point here is not about your original funding, but about the fact that projects evolve over time and need to be considered in today's context. So key point here is number 4. We request that you do not approve the 4th amendment to the ILA between Kitsap Public Facility District and Kitsap County that has been submitted to you by county staff before it is approved by the county commissioners. So in an email to Marion Allen this morning, Eric Baker, who's here, stated the board is aware of ILA amendment and its request for additional time to June 30th, 2025. However, Eric goes on to say, the Board of Commissioners has not considered the specific document and is awaiting KPFD board consideration on Monday, today. If approved by KPFD, the commissioners could consider the ILA on Wednesday, December 20th. So, end of quote. It appears that this is coming to you then from staff for your approval prior to consideration by the Board of Commissioners. So we would ask that you hold back on approval of this amendment to ensure that the county resolves its issues before proceeding on work in the Port Gamble Park. In conclusion, I'd just like to acknowledge your executive director and for his openness and transparency. We've appreciated that. And I'll end by wishing you happy holidays and our best wishes for the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have another person that wishes to speak?
We do, Mr. Liebescher. And I forgot to mention that comments are limited to 3 minutes. And I will give you kind of a high side when you get close, if you get close.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, I will do my best. I'm tight on my 3 minutes. My name is Joe Liebescher from Indianola, and I have some questions for you about the Exhibit B spreadsheet in the Port Gamble ILA Amendment 4. and some implications about, the district's level of fiscal responsibility. So I've got 6 points here. So number one, it's been 6 months since we asked the district and the county how much the Port Gamble Ride Park was going to cost. The Port Gamble Master Plan said $1.4 million. I was told that was wrong. ILA number 3 said it was $422,000 or $491,000. I was told those were wrong. Kitsap Parks had a contract for $384,000, and now ILA 4 says no, it's only $307,000. I mean, what are we supposed to believe here? And we're still waiting an answer on a really simple question. Okay, number 2, is there an economic feasibility study for this project? What are the economic benefits? The master plan, the framework, didn't really give us an answer. It just threw some numbers, dollars per visit, dollars per overnight visit, dollars for person relocating to the county. So, and I could find no projections of economic benefit and no comparisons with the capital costs or the in-kind costs or the O&M costs. So number 3, the ride park parking area. A relatively simple facility has doubled in cost from $600,000+ to $1.25 million. How come? We need some explanations for this for the public as well as yourself. Number 4, the Sound to Olympic Trail has been all over the map. So I think the A and B segments were abandoned. And now the spreadsheet lists those as A, D as in Delta, and E. Assuming that D is unchanged, what are A and E? So there's nothing in the amendment that tells us this. A and E is entirely new to the project. A is reportedly something different but not defined. And so we need some definition. Similarly with the line that says remaining trail segments. Is that still C1, C2, C3? Is there a different route if things changed? I don't know. And lastly, the planning cost jumped 27%, while at the same time the design level dropped from 30% to, I believe, 10%. So it's kind of a double whammy that needs an explanation.
Mr. Liebescher, you have about 10 seconds left.
Well, I will ask the board for a little bit more time, if I may. It took a while to get down here. May I continue?
Just 1 second, Mr. Liebescher. Go ahead, Chairman.
How much more time do you need?
Probably another minute.
Okay.
So point number 5, the STO construction cost estimates have just ballooned extraordinarily. They've gone from $3 million to $6.3 million, and now it's over $15 million. So a reasonable interpretation is that this is an out-of-control project or an ill-planned project or both. So what is your analysis? And is the board potentially painting itself into a fiscal corner here? Number 6, the new A and E segments of the STO are reported to be entirely outside the boundaries of the park. So that makes me ask, how can those segments even be part of the ILA? That's, seems to me that's completely out of the scope. So those are my 6 points. They're not casual, and I request that you take a look at the particulars, address them, and get back to us. And I also recommend that the board not move forward on number 4 until we get some explanations and answers presented to the public on this. Thank you, and if I can offer any clarifications, let me know. Otherwise, I'll give Russ a copy of my comments.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. And we have one more public comment.
Let me check here. Mr. Anderson, the mic is yours if you have anything you'd like to say to the board. Mr. Anderson?
Hello, host.
Yes, sir. The floor is yours, sir. Mr. Anderson, can you hear us?
This is Hank Anderson saying hello.
Okay, any comments, sir? Okay, Mr. Anderson, if you have a comment, you can just put it in this chat, and then I can read it to the board later. All right, Mr. Chairman, there
Okay.
are nobody else online for comment.
Okay, then we will move on to item 3, which is the approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion? Okay, all in favor of approval of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is passed, and the executive director has a few comments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll go to your packet, and I'll pull it up on the screen here as well. And if you want to look at, let me go down a bit here. There we go. Okay, if you go to the sales tax rebate revenue summary, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. So you can see in November, we were up 2.2% from this time last year. The other thing too is that I started putting these positive or negative arrows for you to reflect back on. That maybe makes it get a little bit more visualization, but you can see through the year so far, we're up 1.6% from where we were this time last year, and we've been averaging 195,000 per month through this year. So I just wanted to point that out to you. And then the second one will be the available funds and expenditures report. Again, this just talks about what our current balance is in our capital fund, in our 977 cash fund. 2 fund expenses will be City of Port Orchard, which you just approved on their invoices, and then our 968 operating expenses. The $52,206.91 is the balance of the operating expenses only. For 977 fund, we have a balance of $880,816, and that's for the cash fund account. Okay, those are the only comments I wanted to make. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, just my casual examination of the sales tax rebate, it looks like last month was the highest we've ever received.
I think you're correct. That is very
So
good.
it's always good to set a new high.
Yes, I agree. So now we'll move on to general business. The first one's going to be the Finance Committee discussion regarding KPFD accounting services. Who's going to discuss that? The Finance Committee or the Executive Director?
Yeah. I'm prepared to do that, Russ, if you want.
Yes, sir, absolutely, please.
We met twice. We put out an RFP. Russ told us that we put it out to 5 different firms. We heard
Correct.
back from 3 of the 5. Ultimately, only 2 of the 5 actually submitted responses to our RFP. The Finance Committee met twice, once with each of the accounting firms that responded. And just for your information, they were Waterfront CPA Group and Parker, Moores, and Cena Certified Public Accountants. We met with representatives. We met by Zoom with representative from each of those firms for probably an hour or so. And it's our opinion that we should go with Parker, Moores, and Cena for several reasons. Their projected numbers, at least to begin with, were a little bit lower. And one of the things we have to do is we have some catch-up work to do. Our previous accountant was unable to submit a number of tax returns for 2022 and is behind on some of the quarterlies for 2023. So the firm that we're recommending seemed to have done more research, have a better grasp of how much was required to do that catch-up work. Both firms' analysis of what was required for ongoing work were very similar, but I would say all in all, we were more favorably impressed by Parker, Moores, and Cena. So I don't know if the other members of the committee have other comments to make.
Yeah, just to say that it was unanimous with the three of us that we all felt we should go with the Parker, Moore, and Cena company.
Any other comments on it? No? And then it appears we can see if anyone wants to make a motion for Parker, Moores, and Cena to become our CPA.
I'll move that we employ Parker, Moores, and Cena to be our accounting firm for, Russ, do we have to do, is it 3 years? It was a 3-year RFP, right?
Correct, it's a 3-year RFP, correct.
So Russ will negotiate that contract, and we'll have them for the next 3.
And also, we have put it into the budget too, so when we get to the budget discussion, you'll see. And it wouldn't have mattered whether it was Parker, Moore, Cena, or Waterfront CPA. They gave us the same amount, the annual amount of what it would be to be our tax service. So
Very, very close.
right, so when you see in the budget for accounting services for next year, it would be for either one.
Okay. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on this?
I just want to clarify, I'm going to need to abstain on this, just I work with both firms, so I think just to avoid any potential
Okay.
appearance of conflict.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I assume that this motion is to have Brian draw up a contract for us, or is there a contract already submitted from Parker, Moore, and Cena?
There's one that's already submitted to us. Now, of course, I wanted to run through our legal counsel first to make sure that he's good with it, and then if he's good with it, then I will go back to Parker, Moore, Cena, and tell them that it's been approved by the board and the contract is approved. If they need to sign it on there, and then they can do that as well.
So I might just make the amendment that is, as long as it passes Mr. Lawler's evil eye, that then we move forward with that.
Okay, for that, I believe, do we need to withdraw the original motion and add that to the original motion?
I think I just need a second to my amendment.
Correct.
I'll second that amendment.
Oh, okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And one abstention. Okay. With that, we'll move on to the 2024 budget proposal.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, if I
Yes.
interrupt you, the people online are telling me that they can't hear me. And what I don't know is if they can't hear you. Also, I can't speak to anybody in the chat because the keyboard's not working. It's, looks like it needs new batteries because it's a wireless keyboard. So I can't respond back to them. So what I'd like to ask is if any of you are panelists, I see Shannon and Cindy, if you could unmute yourself, if we can hear you, let us know if, well, or if one of you would ask, because apparently they can't hear me at all. So let me mute myself and then,
Or do you want to take a short recess to work this out?
yeah, if you don't mind, that would be
Okay,
good.
we'll take a short 5-minute
All right,
recess.
thank you. I'm sorry, I don't, they're not hearing me on the audio. I can't talk to them in the chat because the keyboard's not working, so I don't know. See where they can help us. What's that? Is that your laptop that can't hear you? No, I'm just using the normal system here, should tie in. What I don't know, and I can't communicate with them, is I don't know if they can hear you all as well. They said they can't hear me, but I don't know if they can hear you, so.
Trying to see what I can drum up. We're having technical problems here at the chambers in regards to how much the related issue. I saw it before. Big years.
No, I still keep your corrections, so I'll get the rest of it.
So Shannon, tell us that again.
So what do you think? Clarifications?
I won't speak to it yet.
And you can't hear the board either?
This is a test?
Okay, we're gonna.
Here, just one second.
He is screen here somewhere.
Recording stopped.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, we'd like to give you an opportunity now, if you can hear us, if you'd like to make a public comment.
Yes, hi there. It's too bad you're having such issues. Again, this is Hank Anderson. I live in Silverdale. I'm curious to know if you had a special meeting in November to discuss the project at Bainbridge Island for the Memorial Association. I didn't see or hear any indication that there was a special meeting or any documentation of it.
No, Mr. Anderson, there was not a special meeting. Executive committee met with the city of Bainbridge and with the Bainbridge Island Municipal Parks District, but there was nothing decided, so it was not an official meeting.
Okay, well, that's fine. That's the only question I had.
Okay, thank you, sir. Have a great Christmas.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the 2024 budget proposal. Who would like to speak to that?
I'll speak to that, Mr. Chairman. Just to review, this is our operational budget, runs from January 1st through December 31st of 2024. I'll talk a little bit about the bottom line and then highlight a couple of things that may have changed. This year, you see from the very bottom, we were budgeted at $319, almost $320,000. Next year, the Finance Committee is proposing a budget of $339, so up about $20,000. If you look over to the far right corner at the bottom, our projection is that we'll be under budget by about $37,000, almost $38,000. So I'd like to just highlight a couple of things that contribute to the slight increase in proposed budget, working from the top to the bottom. Payroll is up. You recall we had a discussion some time ago. We went with the 2% pay raise for the executive director, and that's in line with what the county is approving for their employees for this upcoming year. So there's a slight increase there. You see an increase you see Medicare at $2,000 for 2024 as compared to $0 for 2023. And if you look over to what we're spending, we're spending close to $2,000. So that was really an error in budgeting that, as we recall, started in 2022 where we failed to budget for Medicare, and then it got carried forward to 2023 where we failed to budget. And we're just bringing that back in line with reality. The 2024 budget for employment security, 5,400, is we just significantly under budgeted this year. It's much more in line with what we've actually paid this year. And then the other thing, the phone stipend, that's new. We previously discussed that to give the director a phone stipend. So that's a new expense. Not much in communications to speak of down in the promotional part. We're leaving that at $15,000. We've only spent a little over $4,000 so far this year, but we have an outstanding obligation out there having to do with a wrestling tournament of $3,000. So depending on whether or not we hear from them before the end of this year, our actual expenses will be around $7,300. We left that at $15,000 because we've talked about changing our process for accepting proposals, and it's kind of a crapshoot as to whether that will result in more people asking for money or not. So we thought the safe thing to do was to leave it. One of the big reasons the budget is up a little bit is down in the next consulting services. Washington State audit, we're due for an audit in 2024. So we haven't budgeted anything for the last several years. We get audited every third year. And so we had put an amount in that for the state, payment to the state. auditors. Let's see. The, down in membership membership dues, you see a significant increase in the KEDA dues. And I would defer to Erin on that because she's a key to person. I don't know if that's a one-year increase for them or if it's going to be 5,000 every year, and they're just trying to do business differently.
Yeah, I mean, this is our one-year budget, so this is our commitment just in 2024.
Oh, okay. So we put money in to honor that request. And I think that's about it. I think it's a very reasonable budget, and I'd like to commend Russ for the performance against this year's budget, where we're nearly $38,000, projected to be $38,000 under. So questions? If I can't answer them, which I probably can't, Russ can.
Sure. I have a few questions. What is the guidelines policy consult line item for 20,000? That seems to be new.
It is new. I'll let Russ address that. That's Moxie Solutions.
Correct. So earlier this year, one of the things we'll talk about is funding guidelines that I put together for us to kind of take a look at. So in order to be able to put that together, I was given the name, I'm going to mute the system themselves. I was given the name of an individual that helps to craft policy, employee handbooks, board of director handbooks, and the like. So the first thing I asked her to do was to help me to kind of put these guidelines together, both for the board and for public entity. And so in working with her and asking her, telling her the things I want to try to get accomplished this next year, like some of those handbooks and other policies and so forth that I'd like to work on, she gave an estimated budget to be about $20,000 for the entire year. So the executive board gave me permission to go ahead and contract with her on this one thing that we just did, the guidelines. So you see the 3,600 is what we paid for that service. Then 20,000, what I'm asking for 20,000 would be to continue to have her assist us in 2024.
Do you see that being just a one-year thing, so it's done in 24 and we don't need to do it in 25, 6?
Correct.
Okay. And then my other question is just, I don't see it under marketing and advertising services. Was nothing budgeted this year or next year, but then what was actually spent of 7,700 this year? Is there?
That was the sign, our exterior sign.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay. Otherwise, looks good to me. I don't have any other questions.
Do we have any other questions? If we don't have any other questions, then we will need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? Nope. All in favor of approving the 2024 budget?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. So the 2024 budget is approved. We'll move down to Resolution 02-2023, the 2024 holiday schedule. Would you like to speak to that, Executive Director?
Yes, sir, I sure will. And then, Brian, can you still hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. I found our echo solution, so apologize for that. So I don't recall us doing this since I've been here. So what I did is I put together the holiday schedule. I thought it was good for the public to know what our holiday schedule is. That's the reason why I created it as a resolution. It matches exactly what Kitsap County holiday schedule is. So all this is just a resolution to accept the holiday schedule for 2024. And that's the only point to this resolution. More than anything else is to be transparent with the public as to what holidays we observe.
Mr. Chairman, one nitpick. I thought Washington's birthday had been combined with Lincoln, and it was now President's Day.
Yeah, and I actually looked on the federal holiday, and they listed as Washington's birthday. Yeah.
I learned something.
Okay, then, do we have a motion to approve Resolution 02, 2023?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any more discussion on the holidays? No, all in favor of approving Resolution 02, 2023?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Okay, that motion, or that resolution passes. And we'll move down to the 2024 board meeting schedule and locations. And the resolution's going to be drafted based on our discussions after we hear what everyone thinks.
Correct, exactly right. So if you recall, earlier in the year, we talked about going to every other month. By law, according to the RCW, we have to meet 6 times a year, but we do not have to meet monthly. So what the proposal is that we meet every other month as opposed to once a month. Those locations that you have next to those dates are locked in at those particular days. You'll notice, though, that not all of our meetings are going to be on Mondays, simply because the building that we have locked in, it's just not available, say, on the Kitsap County Administration Building in February. Monday, the 26th, is not available to us because the county commissioners will be using it. So there will be other days that we'll meet during the end of the month, as opposed to just typical Monday. I highlighted that up underneath at the very top where it talks about regular meetings will be held and when they'll be held. So that is the current resolution. Now, you'll notice that I didn't give a resolution number to it. And the reason why is because I know there's going to be some discussion about, number one, are we sure that's what we want to do, is to go every other month? And then number two, do we want to do something other than the locations that I've secured? So I'll leave that open for discussion.
On the concept of every other month, I'm okay with that. I think it could get confusing for the public to remember Wednesday versus Monday versus Tuesday. That's my only concern about changing that. I guess the only other question is if, for example, the Kitsap County Admin Building's not available, say on a Monday, is the Port Orchard building available?
The reason why we have these locations is because those are the 4 locations where BCAT can record it. And so that's the reason why it doesn't include the city of Port Orchard. It doesn't include the city of Port Orchard because of that reason.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's more of an advantage to meet in the same place on the same night, even if it's every other month. I think originally one of our objectives by moving around was to give people in various parts of the county, for us to get more visibility, give them a chance to come out and attend our meetings. But we're not actually overrun with mighty throngs of visitors, as you recall. So I'm not sure that's paying off. I think it's somewhat of an advantage to the public, at least to know we're always on the same day of the month in the same place.
Okay, so how does everyone else feel about a single location, a central location? I know it can be difficult to come from the north end of the county all the way down here, or vice versa. I understand that. So that's why I want to get everyone's input on this. We want a central location in perhaps Silverdale somewhere and have the meetings there.
Mr. Chair, I would still say that I think it is a good system to move it around, and it is a long drive for some of us when we move it rather than having it centrally located. But I do think it does put us in every venue then, and we can show the public by our actions that we would like to get input. That when we did run into problems of people saying, that they didn't have access, this would allow us to receive those same kind of responses again. I think by us moving, even Bainbridge as a city, said that they didn't have access or whatever. So If we meet in their very chambers, then, at least they see it once a year that we're there. So I still think for us to go through the inconvenience of driving for 30 minutes, it's worth it to try and connect with constituents.
Okay, thank you. Everyone else want to weigh in on this?
I have a slightly different take, and that is, I think, back to my original comment, that the public is probably going to prefer it to be on a consistent night. I don't know, given this day and age of Zoom, where if people really want to log in and, watch what's happening or even give their input, like Mr. Anderson, he does a great job. He's with us every month. But if we mix it up on different days, I don't know if he's going to be able to, remember to do that, because or he may remember, but he may have other things going on, different things. Whereas he can do that from his own house, regardless of where the physical meeting is. So, my preference is to go more with the physical location being in one spot if it kind of guarantees certainty on dates. So if that means we could meet, it doesn't have to be a Monday, but it meets every Wednesday at the Kitsap County Admin Building, or a place in Silverdale that could be host BCAT, or Paulsbo, somewhere more central on a consistent night. I think that would be preferable to bouncing it around the county on inconsistent dates.
Executive Director Shiplett, if I could ask, the date changes. This is the first time that we're putting that forward as Wednesdays or Tuesdays instead of keeping it consistent on Mondays. And I agree with that moving from day to day is going to make it more confusing for people. Are there no Mondays available at the Kitsap County Administrative Building?
So what I would have to do is go back for the Wednesdays and the Tuesday that I have. I have to go back and see if, say, the week earlier, but on that Monday, if it's available or not. And if it's not, then we may end up doubling up at some of these others, which that's fine too. I mean, we may be 2 months in a row at the Norm Dix Government Center if we're going to continue to do the rotation. So it's just a matter of me going back to find out, like for Christmas, or for our December meeting, December 17th, Tuesday, the 16th isn't available. I don't want to do it at the 23rd, so I'd have to see if it'd be available, say, that first Monday of the month. But if we can't do it at the Norm Dix Government Center, we'll do it one of the other locations. So, and remember, these locations are based upon where BCAT can do the recording. We always have the capability of recording by Zoom, which I do anyway. So if it means that BCAT wasn't at a location, I save our recording, and that's what goes up on YouTube, so then the public can go back and look at the meetings later on.
Mr. Chair.
After the fact, without BCAT participation.
Correct. Yeah, I always record these meetings, so if something happened on BCAT's end, then I have a plan B, and I can still put it up on YouTube.
Mr. Chair, I might echo some of the comments around a static night of the week. For instance, I take on a new role myself here, and Tuesday, December 17th would be in direct conflict with another board that I'll be sitting on shortly. So just my two thoughts there. I don't have any preference either way on whether we're at a static location or if we rotate that, but I do think that we should remain on a set night of the week.
And that's the reason why I didn't put a resolution number on this, because I knew there's going to be a lot of discussion, so we can change it as whatever we need to do.
Okay, we have two more directors. I'd like to hear your input.
I like to stay static on Monday also, and I'm not worried about doubling up on meetings in the same place. Is there any downside to using Zoom versus using BCAT? Because that takes the Port Orchard out of the equation if we don't use BCAT, right? I mean, if
it does. You could even, we've talked about this, even if we met, say, at the mall, like we have for a special meeting, if we had a special video camera that could capture everybody as they're speaking, that's the advantage that we have with BCAT.
All right.
right? But if we had a special camera, which they do make one of those for video conferencing, and it rotates as people speak, then you basically have got what BCAT has to offer.
But, so it's easier to stick with BCAT.
Well, it is, and, the quality of it, everything else is.
I mean, that's a good reason. So-
The other thing too is that BCAT keeps it on their platform when it's recorded, so the public not only can go to our YouTube page, but they can go to BCAT too and pick up the recording.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about location so much, but I would like to stick with Monday also.
Two things for me. One, I don't have a preference on a particular day or a particular location, although I do prefer moving around. But I will point out that this is our last meeting of the year, and if we don't resolve this evening, we don't have a next meeting to discuss this.
I believe we already have a January meeting scheduled from last year, correct?
We don't have a January, I'm sorry, no, we do not have a January meeting scheduled for 2024.
Okay, maybe it was, were we going to call a special meeting for the Bainbridge project?
If it was, if it was necessary, we could do that. But the other thing too is that if you give me guidance and say, okay, Director, we want to stay with Mondays, and whatever of these locations works for that, if the board is good with that, then I can craft a resolution number to it, and then I can send it to the executive committee for approval. But the board here would vote, right, take a motion and vote on that to give me permission to go and make these changes. Once those changes are made, say, we're good with that resolution. It'd be resolution 042023.
So that resolution would have to be voted on at a meeting though, correct?
Mr. Waller, can you weigh in on that? You're muted.
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
So we're talking about the resolution. I didn't give it a number right now because I knew we were having a lot of discussion. But if the board were to direct me, if they made a motion and it passed and direct me and says, we want to make sure our meetings are always on Mondays, we don't care where those locations are that you have listed, even if it means we're doubled up, just make sure that we're meeting consistently on Mondays. Can I assign a resolution number to it, and then it be signed by the executive committee, or does it need to go before the entire board?
The resolution would need to come before the board, so you could make a motion tonight to adopt whatever policy you want to, and then at the next meeting, it would be in a resolution form for approval, or maybe even in the consent agenda if, everyone is bought off with the notion.
Okay, the fact that we're going to be, this doesn't have us meeting until February. If we were to call a special meeting in January, I believe we can only discuss one item, and we have to identify that one item in the special meeting, correct?
You have to address you have to specify in the agenda what the meeting is for. I can't remember if it's for one issue or not. Why don't we keep talking, and I can, look that up in the MRSC while we're talking.
Because, Mr. Chairman, that could be our solution is to call a special meeting in January if we've got not only this resolution to vote on, but anything else, any other discussions we're going to have. Then if we can do more than just one action item in a special meeting, then that might be our solution.
Okay.
After I make adjustments to this.
Mr. Chair and Executive Director, I'm pretty sure rules on special meetings won't allow for that type of action. So I might just throw out that I make an amendment to this resolution and we approve it tonight, if that would be amenable to this group. So I'm going to make a motion to adopt, I believe it's Resolution 04-2023, as presented with the amendments to move them all back to the Mondays that they would normally fall on, and with places to be determined.
So my only question on that is, don't we have to have a resolution to go out to the public with the actual dates and times now when we pass it?
That's what I'm attempting to do right here. I'm saying that we're going to change that to Monday, February 26th, and Monday, December the 16th. and Monday would be, what, October the 28th? Those are the amendments I'm trying to make with a to-be-determined place.
Okay, but would we be able to get the locations we want then? Or would we willing to forego BCAT and go somewhere else if we can't get where we need to be?
I'm saying that there will be some place for us to meet wherever Russ can find. I don't care where they're at.
See, I don't know, does the location have to be in the resolution?
It wasn't last year.
It wasn't?
No, and we've changed them since.
Okay.
And I think honestly, if something comes up that the October or December dates don't work, we could do an amended resolution next year.
We'd be doing it for the February.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that if we're saying, the February one, just historically, was always on that last Monday, so we just keep that same date and do, location to be determined. But I like the idea of every other month, so we know that, so I think, I'll second John's amended proposal.
And just make sure, so what we're going to do is we're going to change to every Monday on these 6. And then the location we'll have to put out later, depending on where we get. Yeah, if that's fine with Brian, I'm totally okay with that.
Essentially, the only thing you're determining in the resolution are the dates that you're meeting.
Yeah.
Which is all that's required.
Does that work, Mr. Lawler? Where we
Yeah, it does. And while you were discussing that, I did look up special meetings, and just for future reference, you can have more than one topic at a special meeting. You just have to list the topics for the special meeting in the notice and agenda.
All right, thank you.
Okay, if we can do this now, I'm good with this. Do we have any other discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, so this resolution, I'm assuming we'll get a number on it when we get done.
Correct. It'll be 04. And what I'll do is, once I have the locations nailed, now that we know that the dates are nailed down, and let me make sure I understand. We want to meet on Monday, February 26th. We want to meet on Monday, October 28th. We want to meet on Monday, December 16th. Location to be determined. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the Bainbridge Island Parks District ILA. Do you want to discuss that?
Correct. Just to give the board an update on that, the executive committee, along with our legal counsel, Bainbridge Island Municipal Parks District, the city of Bainbridge, and their legal counsels met to discuss a potential ILA. The ILA would be for considering that the PFD would pay up to $500,000 to run a water line from a nearby wellhead about a half a mile from where the site is, where the visitor center would go up, to a hydrant on site. From the hydrant, there'd be a tap off to potable water that would go to a visitor center, which they plan to build. There'll be a small outdoor amphitheater and also parking, extended parking. It's located at Pritchard Park. The reason why those parties, we were talking with those parties, was to determine if our board voted to go ahead and agree to an ILA, who is our public entity that we're partnering with. And so it was determined that since the visitor center would be located at Pritchard Park, which is part of the Metropolitan Parks District, then the Metropolitan Parks District is going to they're going to own and maintain the visitor center. So they would be the main sponsor, if you will, with PFD. We would mention the city of Bainbridge, and the reason why is the city of Bainbridge is the one that would run the line. They would own and operate the line. But it's through the city of Bainbridge that we would reimburse costs up to $500,000 to run that line. So no money would exchange hands, if you will, between the PFD and the Metropolitan Parks District, Bainbridge Island. The money portion of it would be part of the city of Bainbridge Island. So our legal counsel, Mr. Lawler, drafted an ILA, an initial ILA. It is off to legal counsel for both the Metropolitan Parks District and the city of Bainbridge. And then once they've had their changes and inputs into it, then it would be brought to the board for consideration. So that's the update that I had. But obviously, I think that there's to be some discussion about that as well. So that's the reason why I put it on the general business is for discussion.
Okay, do we anticipate the special meeting then to deal with this in January?
That's what I would anticipate, correct. A special meeting at sometime in January, correct.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion about it?
So Russ, is our ILA with Bainbridge Island Parks Department or with the city of Bainbridge Island or with both of them?
So both will be mentioned. The ILA will be a partnership with the Metropolitan Parks District, since they're going to do the operation and maintenance of it. Now, the other thing too is that the visitor center isn't built yet. So the memorial is up, but their final portion of it is the visitor center, an outdoor amphitheater, and additional parking, and then running the water line to that. After that completes the entire memorial of what their vision's been for several years now. And the overall Japanese American Exclusion Memorial is well over $10 million that it's taken. They're not asking us to help for the construction of the visitor center or the amphitheater or parking. They're just asking for our help. Ours is the last piece of that they're looking for funding to run that water line.
Mr. Chairman, a comment, if I may. I think it's important for us as a board to set a date for when we will hear future project proposals for funding. This couldn't be a more important project to have a Japanese American exclusion memorial. It fulfills our mission of building communities and enriching lives, because it teaches us our history and it helps us learn about who we want to be as a community going forward. However, this is the exact same kind of a situation that we got into with Circuit of the Northwest, where we said yes to Circuit of the Northwest outside of a funding proposal, and then found ourselves caught in an action that we had taken, trying to do the right thing, trying to say, hey, it's only 60,000 at that time, when we said yes, and then it was only 600,000. This is only 500,000. But I think we have to set a date for when we will have all of our projects come forward and have this one be part of that.
Yeah, and as a board, we're going to discuss how we want to go about that in the future. That will be something that we'll be discussing if we want to do it with one set date, take projects as they come, or however the board sees fit to do this. So that is on our radar and will be done.
Do you have a thought on when, like, are we going to do that as part of maybe a special meeting in January? Or, because I think that needs to be something ironed out pretty quickly. Just if we approve this ILA, there are going to be others that hear about that and are going to want to come in, and it's going to be hard to say yes or, yes with no guidelines, or no, even though we did this with this project. And I'd like to get that nailed down sooner than later on what our policy is, one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree also, and I would be okay with doing it in the February meeting if everyone else is like that. I think it might take a little bit of time to do, because there's going to be a lot of discussion. But if it works for Executive Director Shiplet, does a February meeting work? Maybe get that on the agenda?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, it's whatever the board wants to do, and if the board says we'll discuss it in February, we can discuss it in February. If the board would like to do a special meeting, we can do that.
So would we not be discussing the Bainbridge Island project in January because we're going to be setting our guidelines in February?
No, the guidelines would come in February. The Bainbridge Island, we'll be looking at the ILA in January to approve it. So that'll be done before we do the guidelines. And what we'll be looking at, from what I understand, is what we're going to do from here on out. Are we going to take projects as they come, or set one date and say, this is it, have your project ready by then? Is that what you were thinking?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't privy to the discussions with the city of Bainbridge. I don't know how far down the pike that's gone with them. Have we basically committed to giving them the funding, just subject to the formality of writing up an ILA to be voted on, or what? I mean, I'd hate to say suddenly to them, no, we're not going to do it because we still have to write these proposals. Yet at the same time, I think it's important that we do have guidelines. certainly going forward, but I'm not, as Darren said, we've kind of painted ourselves into a little bit of a corner by kind of taking this on before setting up what our policies and procedures are going to be. I don't know. I would certainly say if we do this at the February one, if we can keep the rest of the agenda to a minimal amount of, maybe not having a presentation by one of our groups, because I think it's going to be a lively discussion, because there can be several different philosophies on how best to do it, not to mention ironing out the details.
Okay. Yeah, we're not committed to anything with Bainbridge Island until we do the vote, until the ILA is approved. Any other discussion on this?
Yeah, so I do agree with Darren that we need to set a date, a future date when we'll hear proposals for new projects. But I also think that the door should always be open. And in this case, we had a very special opportunity to work with this memorial, and we can say no. I personally am fully supportive of it because I think it's a great project for us to have our fingerprints on. It's a great project for the community. Quite frankly, it's a great project for the entire country. And so I'm proud that we're going to consider it, and I hope that everybody is supportive of it.
Mr. Chair, I would say I agree with the sentiments of Director Bullock and Director Jagodzinski. I think it's a wonderful project. I do worry, right? We have commitments that we've made to 3 other projects that we don't have the funding to fund those on, both today or in the future. So I think that's something to be cognizant about. And so I think what the point I wasn't in agreement with Director Bullock's is always being open, because we only have a finite amount of money to be spent.
And you can always say no.
Agreed, but again, we'd have to always say no because we don't have any money to be spent. We don't have enough money coming in to cover the projects that we've already committed to, and we haven't even considered all of their upcharging costs. I know we heard earlier from public comment around some of the budgets for the Port Gamble. But we've already made a $12 million commitment to each one of the 3 projects, with not that amount guaranteed to come in. So I think as maybe we do a look at future revenue forecasts, and as those grow, maybe set some opportunity to hear some projects and then be able to have them. And I think maybe, because I've been thinking about this a lot after some conversations with Director Jagodzinski around understanding that maybe we hear RFPs and we create a list of possible fundings and rank them every so often so that as money becomes available, we can allocate to a project next. But it would be tough for us unless we go back to our elected officials down in Olympia and extend once again the sales tax rebate for us to do that, or we would have to consider implementing a taxing authority that we have in order to hear future projects. My point is there's just no more money to be spent.
I know that we've done our cash forecast, looking at our existing projects, and have we looked at how this would fit in there? I know there's, depending on what sales tax comes in, we've got some pinch points that we've looked at, depending on what we fund. Is this out of, how is this going to be paid, I guess?
This was going to be paid out of cash, correct, Executive Director?
Correct. It'd be paid out of the 977 available cash fund.
Yeah. And we do have commitments with the other organizations, but I don't think the only one that we have an actual $18.5 million commitment to is Port Orchard at this time.
And forgive me if I misspoke. I wasn't on the board at the time, but I do believe that each one of the projects was expecting, at a minimum, a $12 million contribution towards their project. No? Was that incorrect?
No,
I would say that is correct. We have ILAs for lesser amounts, but both with the county and with the city of Paulsbo, That was an understanding that was at least spoken of. And invite anybody else who was on the board at that time to speak to that.
Yeah, I know when I was voting to approve, I was voting to approve the dollars that we did the ILE in at the time, because the projects were all new, and they were all being roughed up, and nobody, we put them together quickly. So it was not my expectation that we were guaranteeing $12 million to the other ones, but rather the expectation I had was we were guaranteeing what the ILA was.
And I think you're correct that we don't have the money out of cash flow, if you will. But, previous projects we've done, we've sold bonds and financed through that way, and we have a revenue stream at least 2041. So, and I understand there's a move afoot to extend it beyond that in the legislature.
Okay, we have no more comments. I mean, it sounds like we're going to have some work cut out for us at the February meeting then, discussing how we want to do this. Okay.
So are we going to table, we're going to table discussion about, I just want to make sure I understand. We'll table discussion about the ILA that's being drafted for this particular project. Or are we not going to discuss that and the meeting's going to be around when we determine that we're going to accept project proposals?
So it's kind of hard to understand you, but so.
I'm sorry. So, right, we've been talking about a draft ILA and whether or not we were going to move forward with it. But part of that discussion was, well, why would we even consider this? Because we didn't do an RFP, so to speak. So is the discussion then that we don't move forward with continuing to work on a draft ILA with the Parks District and with the city of Bainbridge until the board has decided whether or not they're going to entertain that particular ILA?
Okay, I think we've moved far enough in it. We'll have the meeting in January with the ILA, and the board at that time can vote it up or down.
And so then we plan on voting on the ILA in February then? Is that what you're saying?
Or
Based upon
January.
Or January, okay.
Yes, and then if the board isn't ready for it, they can vote it up or down.
Right, okay, I just want to make sure I understand the context of the meeting, so when I'm drafting the consent, or when I'm drafting the agenda, then I know exactly how to speak to it.
I don't have any clue how to properly articulate this, but I think we're painting ourselves into a corner for taking a project that I think is a great project and having to vote no on it because we haven't done process right. And how we got to a point where we gave assurances to Bainbridge that we were willing to go forward with an ILA and fund this project is, I think, where we made the mistake without the board voting on that and saying that this was a project that we wanted to get an ILA put forward on, but to continue to go forward and have a meeting to discuss whether we're going to vote for it or not in January before we have an understanding of what we want the process to be, which up until this point, my understanding is that we were not taking new projects on. And so this is the first time I've heard of a new project outside of the ones we've heard of that has come forward and said we would like to put forward a project. So anyway, I think this is a bad idea to have a meeting in January when I feel hamstrung.
Okay, I do feel, though, that guidelines are good, and I like that, but I agree with Director Bullock. Sometimes a project comes along that we can do, and it's a great project that probably should get done. You know, and I think we owe it to Bainbridge Island. When did they first bring this up to us?
I want to say this spring, it was when I was first approached by Mr. Tolleson when he gave me a phone call. That was about April or May. And if you recall at the time, City Manager Blair King from Bainbridge had sent a letter. The city was saying they supported it and asking us for our support. Our response, and something that I'd sent through the board for comment to make sure we were right, our response was, Well, we're not going to consider the funding, and it doesn't meet the criteria anyway. And that was really the reasoning for us not considering it. We didn't make any mention in that letter that we're not considering it because right now we're not considering any projects. It was more to the fact that it doesn't meet the requirements where we could legally fund a project like that. But then the city of Bainbridge, the discussion just kept coming up, and that's what took us then to the meeting with the Parks District and with the city of Bainbridge on what is everybody looking for, and that's how we got pulled into this meeting, if you will. And listen, I'll take full, I'll take the full blame for that, if blame is the right word, for pulling us into a meeting with the Parks District and with the city of Bainbridge without making sure the entire board was in it. But more than anything else, I just wanted to get my hands wrapped around, understand what is it you're really asking for, and could we even possibly do it? And that's why we brought legal counsel in to say, is this a project that, if the board voted on, we can legally fund? And the determination was, yes, we can legally fund it, but of course, it's up to the board on whether or not they want to fund it. And so the ILA was really just that. So I apologize if I put us in a spot where I painted us into a corner by having this meeting with the Parks District and with the city of Bainbridge. I was more than anything else trying to just get a full understanding and scope of it. I will say that the I'll reserve my own comment to myself. So go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
So what's their timeline then? Do they have to have this looked at in January?
I don't believe so. They probably wouldn't run the water line until the spring anyway, if they got the funding for that. So we've got time, and I think that Chairman Jagodinski is exactly right. Before we have any kind of discussion about this ILA or anything else, we've got to make sure that we understand when we're going to do that, what's that timeline look like. I think it also has to be related to what Director Morrissey was saying is, do we even have funding? So, why would we even open up RFPs if we weren't sure we had funding? Now, to Director Draper's point, on those big ticket items, yes, we would go get a bond, or we'd be paying a debt service on a bond that's being carried by a city or by the county. So the debt service payments would be fairly manageable, like they are right now with the two bonds that we have with the county. Do we have readily $500,000 in our cash fund? We do. Yes, we do. And could we take it out of it without hurting us? Yes, we could. But again, are we setting precedents by doing that? So it's, I think it's a good discussion. I'll reserve my own feelings about it to myself, but I hear what everybody's saying. And again, I apologize to the board if I painted us into a corner of being forced to make a decision.
Okay. Any other thoughts from anyone on that?
Chairman, I think it just goes to show that I'm glad we approved the budget to have the policies in place that would help facilitate these discussions and the inner workings of this body into the future.
And then I'm going to throw my support for looking at how we're going to disperse funds or look at dispersing funds to the February meeting, not doing this in January and looking at, I too love this project, but I would like to look at overall, I'd love to see a reforecast of the cash and was it our bonding council who did that? To do that from today's point on and look and see where our tight points and, are we going to be in a position of needing that money at any point, or are we really good to utilize it? But to do this 60 days from now and look at it all in one. So that would mean pushing Bainbridge off another 30 days.
Any more thoughts on that?
I just kind of echo that. I would like to see this project succeed if we can make it succeed, but I think having the policies and procedures in place, one of the things, to echo what Aaron said, that would be very helpful for February, because I see there's the two pots. I mean, there's the cash pot, and then there's the potential long-term project. Is there even an option of doing as a kind of a hybrid where we could say every 2 or 3 years, we're willing to consider one project that may be 400, 500,000. It's not one of these mega massive ones, but it's something that keeps us active in the community on a smaller basis. And then every, how often, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know, that's when we do the big rollout of the big projects. But we're not doing either nickel and diming our money away, so when a big one comes along, we can't do it. But conversely, we're not locked into not doing some of these great smaller projects unless they full on bid out, every 10 years or so. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I'd also, to get to that point of if that's viable, have a better financial understanding of how quickly can we if we give away this 500,000, how quickly can we recreate this cash pot for either reserves or for another project in 3 years, so we could say every 2-3 years we could consider something like this again, but instead of it being a straight cold ask, we could maybe put it out to the public and then pick one project on that frequency and then figure how often are we going to put out for a next big bonding kind of scenario. So
that's why it's extremely important that we have Northwest Financial Advisors as part of all that discussion, so they can project out for us and they can give you cold, hard facts.
Are we sitting on about 3.5 million?
That's correct, right. So the way it works is that we get our sales tax rebate check, that comes in, that goes into that capital fund, if you will. Out of that, we have to pay the debt service that we owe on the bonds to the county. And then I take money, whatever we need, out of the capital fund, because the capital fund's interest-bearing. I put it into 977 cash fund, it's not interest-bearing. And the reason why I put money in there is that since we've been a pay-as-you-go on our projects, I pay it out of that cash fund. So I don't have to take often from the capital fund. So that's the reason why the capital fund continues to kind of build up. But at some point, right, we're going to get a big invoice, and we're going to have to take some major chunk out of capital fund and put it into cash fund in order to be able to pay it. I also use the cash fund to pay our operating expenses. So, I transfer money out of that 977 cash. So we have, I think it was 808,000 right now in the cash fund, and over 3.4, I believe, in the capital fund right now.
More comments? So it sounds like most of us would rather wait till February, from what I'm hearing. And maybe we could get a more detailed idea of the financials. So I'm okay with that too then. So we can postpone this until February at least, since it seems like that's what the majority of the board would like to do. Okay?
Yeah, and I didn't make it as an action item here. It was just simply a discussion point. That's why I throw it under general business, and that's why I don't have anything under there like saying depending or, pending.
Okay, and we just won't plan on a special meeting in January then.
Okay, unless there's something else.
Yeah, something else comes up.
Okay.
And all this discussion kind of moves us into the next item, the project funding guidelines.
Yeah, and let me speak to that. I don't want it to be more than what it looks like. When I sent it, the reason why I put it together is, quite honestly, I put it together for me. Because I was having a tough time trying to figure out, okay, what can we and cannot, what can we fund, what we cannot fund, what are the requirements by the state? You have different RCWs, and how do you interpret those RCWs? And so it was confusing, to say the least. Even when I talked with Mr. Lawler, the same thing. I have to refer back to the RCW, and the RCW is not clear. Right, it's it's kind of ambiguous, and I think sometimes it's written that way so the board has the permission to say this is the way we interpret it, and this is the reason why we decided to fund this. So I understand that. What I was trying to do is I was trying to do two things. Number one, create a guideline so the board can look at it and go, okay, here's a project in front of me. Does it meet all this criteria? Does it answer my questions of those criteria? So it's not so confusing to go, gosh, could we even something that's considered? The other part of it's the public entity guidelines. That's the one that says you got to meet all this criteria. If you check yes on each one of those boxes, here's the application process that you go. Now, I understand what Director Havers was saying earlier about the fact that, wow, this looks like we're just open for business. That was never intended to do that. And if I need to change language in there so it doesn't give any hint that, hey, we're open for business, then I can certainly do that. All I was trying to do is create a guidance for our board, for future board members to look out when they know we're considering a project. And just as importantly to the public, so the public can go, how is it that you chose these projects? Well, these are criteria we looked for, this is the criteria they met, therefore the board voted to fund that. So that's what you have in front of you. It's nothing more than that. It's not to drive the board to make major decisions or anything. It's just to put together a guide in front of you and in front of the public.
Okay, do we have any discussion from the board on that?
I have a couple of things. So I had marked up these a little bit, kind of red inked them. And the more I was doing this, the more I was thinking that this is probably something that if a couple of us would put a committee together to sit down and draft this up, go through it with Mr. Lawler before we come back as a board to look at it. In other words, we get a couple people's opinion on the first draft through, and then we'll go through and look at it again. So that's just my suggestion.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of thoughts as well. I would like to see this more as a form of policy rather than written as a funding guidelines. I think it provides a framework for how to move forward when looking at projects and determining our future spending. I think it just is always beneficial, and I think through learning in our lack of policies as an organization is where I've come to advocate for policy.
Okay. More discussion?
I will say that the intent was that if the board approved what we had put together, if it means changing language so it doesn't give the appearance that we're open for business, then we would put in a resolution that would adopt it as policy. So that's always been the intent of this. This is the first step of that.
I think honestly, this is a really good first draft. And I think once we've kind of met in February and had the discussion about what are our criteria, not in terms of individual projects, but the timeline of selecting projects, that can be married in with this, and then this criteria can then help us.
That's exactly what I was
so. I think, yeah, this is definitely a great first start. If Aaron is in favor of doing that committee, I'd be willing to be on it to work through it. But I think that would kind of happen after the March or after the February greater discussion, and then based on how that interplays, then we can kind of massage this on that.
I like the idea of a committee too, as long as.
He volunteered.
I think he volunteered to be on the committee, not lead the committee.
So let me understand that.
But we can talk about that and get maybe 3 people to go over it as a committee.
So the intent then is to take what we've already put together in the committee, take a look at it, and then make suggestions to changes to it, or is it to go back and just start over again on this for the committee? Help me understand what the committee.
I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. It would be have our discussion in February, get our overarching philosophy on how we're going to do the timeline of selections. Are we going to do this ad hoc rolling thing? Are we going to do the hybrid I mentioned? Are we going to do big projects only? Whatever the philosophy is, and then based on that conclusion, my preference would be then take these guidelines that you've drafted and then not even necessarily redraft them, it maybe just add to them to put in a section on timeline. The criteria I think are good. There may be some tweaking, but the big thing on missing that I think this was missing is simply telling them when they can apply and when we're going to consider them. And then once you do apply, these are the criteria we're going to use, which is what I think this is good at.
Yeah, and can I ask a question of the board? Are you all clear on, I know exactly what the criteria is when a project comes before me, or do you just trust the fact that through the executive director, a project's coming to the board and it meets all this criteria? That's one of the things that I want to avoid is I want the board to understand that what is coming to them, they understand each of that criteria. And not only that, they can question it, right? So when it talks about a feasibility study, question the feasibility study, but know that it requires a feasibility study. Yes, I'm going to do my homework ahead of time before we even bring anything to the board. But I don't want to be the know-all, end-all. And so the reason for this and for the board being able to have it is to be able to look at their own checklist, to be a double check to myself, quite honestly.
I would also say I would volunteer to be on that committee and to say we are putting it into this year's budget to have a policy consultant, and it would probably be good to get that person to help us be aware of things that we're not aware of. Same thing with our esteemed lawyer, Brian Lawler, to have him do the same thing. And so I think this is wonderful for getting us focused on something we need to, and now it's just a matter of continuing to keep it moving.
So let me make sure I have Director Leadham, Director Jagodinski, and then Director Havers? Okay.
And Director Leadham?
Okay, sounds like we have a committee for that, so we'll move on to the next item is the Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park ILA Amendment. I'm assuming everyone's read the ILA. Did you want to speak on it, Executive Director Shipley?
I don't have anything to speak on it. Mr. Baker here from the county is here, so Eric, I don't know if you've got anything that you'd like to address to it or not. I know we also have Alex on as well.
Thank you for the record. My name is Eric Baker. I'm with the acting county administrator of Kitsap County. Largely, we are looking at a additional 18 months to complete the various aspects of the Port Gamble project. The Port Gamble project, again, has elements that have been completed. We have a couple other elements that from design, et cetera, have shown greater costs. Also now we have, again, the Sound Olympics Trail that is in a different location than it was due to the fact that the original location was too impactful to both the environment and too costly. I think the process that we moved to get to this point has made for a much better project when I stood before you in 2019. We are your one project that is currently building things right now, and we have been building things over the course of the last few years at a time that building things is substantially more expensive than it ever has been before. And as we are projecting out costs, not just to the end of this ILA, but into the future, we are trying to be more conservative than we were in 2019 because we've seen that not being conservative with those estimates, you never know what's going to come up. I'm hoping not another COVID, hoping not another huge supply chain issue, but seeing receding of these costs is not realistic. So yes, the Appendix B that you do see does show higher costs than 2019 and in the past iterations, and that is based upon truthing of our estimates. However, the amount that we're asking for in the current ILA is not larger than it was previously. The amount that the KPFD is being asked to contribute is the same. The amount the county is being asked to contribute is the same. And the county is dedicated to any additional overruns if, per chance, over the next 18 months, any exist. Thank you. And again, we appreciate the patience of the KPFD. You've been very, very good with Kitsap County. This is a very exciting project. The ride park is shown incredible opportunity already for Kitsap County, and we haven't even finished the parking lot that is so important to getting a large number of people there. It is filled with people all summer long, all winter long. It is going to be an excellent catalyst for recreation in the north end of the county. Thank you, brother.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Baker?
Let me ask Alex. Alex, did you have any comment?
I was just going to reiterate a big thank you to the KPFD board for consideration and funding this project back in 2019. It has been certainly an exciting one to get hired into Kitsap County Parks to see it progress and move forward. We are nearing the end of the elements within this initial project basket of projects, and it's been exciting. Next up is the Stottlemyre parking lot and trailhead at the south end of the park. That one's been through our public bidding process. We are in the process of developing a contract with the construction company and should see that one complete in Q1 of 2024, which will then leave us with the north Ride Park parking lot that Eric was talking about, which will, we have a little bit of design work there, and then that will lead into construction in 2025. So really exciting stuff. Just a big thank you to KPFD for the support for the park and the various project elements.
Thank you, Alex. One thing I wanted to speak to, and it's very in general terms, is that there's still to date $1.217 million that the county has not spent based upon the $2,047,000 that we had committed to. That $1.217 million would be spent completing Stage 2 and then the STO portion of Stage 3, which includes the Stottlemyre parking lot. So the county's not asking for any more funds than we've already committed to. And what it really is just taking the ILA and extending it out to June 30th, 2025. So we're not back here this time next year voting on another ILA amendment. So no additional funds, just stretching out the work that needs to be done still and then spending the money that we've already committed to.
Any questions? If not, we can entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to accept the Fourth Amendment to the Regional Center Interlocal Agreement between Kitsap Public Facilities District and Kitsap County, as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on this?
Isn't this just the thing that these folks had talked at the outset where they had concerns over? Inconsistencies in the numbers and questions that we purportedly had not responded to and all. I'm not so sure that we should just be pressing this thing through without doing something to address their concerns.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I might help. I take that as similar to the Port Orchard project that has grown in costs and has had to change in some of its scope as they get into some of the design work. I'm sure Mr. Baker or the Director of Parks for the county can talk to some of those specific idiosyncrasies or changes that may have happened, but on my side, I've seen enough in what they've presented to us to understand that one, there was no substantive change. We're just extending that timeline for them to be able to take the time and really look at what they're trying to accomplish and make sure that it is the right decision. Hearing Mr. Baker speak this evening and saying the change in the Sound to Olympics Trail, right, has changed so to mitigate the impact to the environment. I like to hear those changes. I also understand that's going to come at an expense at both time and dollars. So I don't have any more questions. I've had them answered by the county for me.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion?
I think from my perspective, I do agree to an extent with Director Morrissey, just in the sense that they're not asking for more money, it's more for an extension here. But should the county come back and later ask, as the other projects have done, for additional funds, I think I'm going to want to do a much deeper dive into what are the changes, what are the costs, what are the cost overruns, what are the delays, that sort of thing of why are we changing what we originally asked for. Absolutely, they can be legitimate for construction costs going up, but if also there are additional delays that, this project could have been completed by X date, and they're getting strung out longer, and because of that, we've now hired more consultants, that's going to drive up costs, then I'm going to look at it harder. But I think from my end, it's just, we're doing an extension at this point, not a substantive change.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Comments? Okay, all in favor of approving the ILA with Kitsap County?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. So the ILA is approved.
Thank you for your time, Steve.
And I believe that is it for our meeting tonight, so we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.